Native Wellness Institute. It's Wellness Wednesday, and Native Wellness Institute is at Barbie's Village. Woohoo! Our new acquired property. Nistu Nidanako Makoyo Sakoi. We've been bringing Wellness Wednesday to you, the Power Hour, since March 2020. I'm from the Siksikatepi, the Blackfoot Confederacy. Most of you I know, thank you if you're brand new. We have special guests. Oh my God, Wellness Wednesday. We combed we went and we took a canoe out, we took a helicopter, we took an airplane, and we got a special guest. Hey! They said he was in Eugene. We went over there. We flew over. He wasn't. He was in Albuquerque. So we went over there and we brought him here. So and this is, Indians. When we're looking for Indians, we talk to another Indian. We talk to some other people of color. We talk to some BIPOC people, we used to call them. We talk to our brothers and sisters, and we'll find you.
They will find you.
They will find you. So today's, we want to honor in America is African American History Month. So where's all you Black Lives Matter people? Did you forget? Where you at now? So I just tease because it's serious business when you bring two cultures together. It's serious business when you bring two tribes together. It's serious business when, as we call races, or we call protocol cultural groups together. And it's a beautiful thing. So we're going to have some discussion around healing. It's always healing. And so I'll start off and then I'll have our special guests introduce. I, as a child, was so protected by all my Blackfeet relatives. I, as a child, thought the whole world was Blackfeet. And when I started to read, there was these other people, but it wasn't until I saw other people that weren't Blackfeet that I got into cultural shock. Because I was raised on the reservation with the grandpas and grandmas, and they all looked like me, and they were all speaking Blackfoot and some English. And so when I first was on relocation with my family, I was only 7.5 years old. And I was starry-eyed because my mom had painted a picture. We were moving to California, which grew oranges on a tree. And I was a child who only got like an orange once a year at Christmas time. And so I was going to a place where oranges grew on the tree. What I first encountered, because I had never seen African American people, is I was so amazed. I thought their hair was beautiful, but I couldn't understand why African American braids could stick out. And I was a child, and I remember I just wanted to go over and interact. But I was a child, and so that was my first encounter. Was I was interacting, and I wanted to see why the hair was different because I had never seen that hair, and I started touching the hair. And my mom got after me. She goes, "You just don't go touch people's hair." And I go, "But Mom, that braid was sticking out like this, and I want my braids to stick out like that." So I was saying, "Well, how can I get my braids? Look at their hair is beautiful. Can we make my hair?" So, some long story short, one of our babysitters was African American, and we talked her into pressing our hair. Pressing our hair, and I remember it burned some of her. But we were just trying to, with no judgment, not saying, "I'm better than you, you're better than me." And then my second encounter is I had a friend named Ruthie Puel, and her family had just come over from Mexico. And so I had never had any kind of Mexican food. So when I went to her house and everything was new, I just remember her mom making tortillas, and she had some flour tortillas and corn tortillas, and she had a really good meat mixture. And then I was watching them because I was, just learning by doing. They were just piling on this green, like chili and red chili, and I didn't know what that was. I thought it was like ketchup. Something. So I'm just a little kid, So I put a whole bunch on my taco, which I didn't even know and then I took a big bite, but I had so much. It was very hot. I didn't know what to do because I thought my mouth went on fire, and I ran over to the sink and poured water in my mouth, and the whole family laughed and made me a peanut butter sandwich. It wasn't until I went into the second grade and everyone in the room was African American except for me and what at that time, became Chicana or Chicano or Latino. It was very good for me, I think, when I came off the res, to be surrounded by African American people. And that makes me want to cry sometimes because I'm glad that they were the first people I was friends with, because I was scared of white people. Because we've been taught that white people lie, white people do all these things, and even though, I just think about those things, and so I learned, I was in Oakland, California, and Berkeley, California. I just grew up, I guess, as an ally or next close to an understanding. And so today, think about before we bring our special guest, think about who you grew up with. Like what was the diversity? Did you grow up with your cousins? Because my cousins were my brothers and sisters, and I learned a lot from them. Did you grow up with someone who looked really different? Because by different, because I just thought it was amazing, when I met Vietnamese for the first time. I just thought it was amazing when I met Japanese people for the first time. And so when we meet people that don't look like us, or maybe even talk like us, eat like us, sing like us, dance like us, how do we be vulnerable to learn about those other people and not judge them in any way? And it's like, just think if we were like that, we'd have a different president, right? But our vice president's okay. No. Anyway, I love the humor and the healing. So I'm just going to pause there. I want to bring on our special guest, and I'll have him introduce, and then we can have a dialogue. So I'd like you to meet Mark Harris.
Mark Harris, not the white Christian rock star, not the supporter of Nikki Haley, though, okay, she's whatever. But I can't pronounce my new Indian name that Theda gave me, but...
Would you like me to pronounce it?
Please.
Okay, so we've been working together since the early 90s, and I gave Mark the name Siki Netsitapi. And Siki means black, and I'm using Netsitapi, which means the real people. I'm calling him a black Indian. So because I see him as the trailblazer, not only historically, but I see him as trailblazing the healing path for black Indians. So Siki Natsitapi. So yeah, now there it is.
Okay.
When we die, it will be on YouTube. Eh?
Whoa! Immortalized, as long as there's electricity in the interweb thing.
Yes, 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 yes.
I'm a jazz musician. I'm 50 years into a career in substance use disorders, which means also virology. As I was just telling our group that's training here in healthy relationships, this is my 6th career pandemic that is COVID, and the first one was AIDS. And so, I mean, you could count the common cold for Hawaiians if you wanted. You could basically talk about other syphilis epidemics, which we're in.
Right.
Again.
Wasn't like George Washington? Did he have? Did he bring syphilis?
Well,
No. Okay. We'll let the introduction. Who brought that syphilis?
Yeah, yeah.
And how did they get it?
yeah.
Okay.
It got here.
It got here.
It got here. So, I come from a black medical family. Basically, all my siblings, except for my brother, who is a customs broker for Apple, basically we're all in medical careers, and I'm the son, father, brother, uncle to physicians. And training physicians. So Dad always asked me, why didn't you go to medical school? You should have gone to medical school. And I said, well, I can see people for an hour and talk them out of their drug addictions rather than the 15 minutes that insurance will allow you to talk to them. And you're going to give them a pill. And I'm saying, and you don't have a pill for racism. So, and your homies basically said that racism is a mental illness. So what would be the pill to have you cope with racism?
A bigger heart.
And he said, yes, a bigger heart. But he said, Dad, Hiawatha Harris, still alive. And so I'm wearing this because I stole the chain, the silver chain, which he was wearing in the 60s. And I'm wearing this turquoise piece, which matched the one that was originally on my mother, who's now an ancestor. But it got stolen by the funeral home. So I replaced it because in the comment that natives have made, that's kind of a heavy piece. Well, she was pretty heavy. And Dad's pretty heavy. And, being the oldest acknowledged son, I had to basically be able to balance the heaviness on the edge of a pin. So, for example, I teach addictions to civilians that are people who are not involved with the active drug war, and the drug wars have been going on for 4 centuries, not just the Reagan era. 4 centuries among black and indigenous people who basically drugs were used as a weapon by the British, Spanish, the fledgling United States to destroy Native and African folks. Okay? And that was deliberate. And it was an American president that forbid the practice of Native American religions in order to allow the United States government to flood reservations with alcohol, hard alcohol, and then imprison or kill any culture bearers, cultural leaders that would oppose that practice. Right? So, why we have the stereotype of drunken Indians, right? That was a weapon of war. That wasn't part of their native indigenous practice of the use of alcohol. because they did have the use of alcohol, but in ceremony, just like ceremony for adults. That is, those tribes that had, for example, agriculture, because worldwide, alcohol comes from an agricultural surplus. Right? There's even a law among indigenous Europeans where nobody can make whiskey until everybody has bread first. Now, who would make a rule like that? Women or men?
The bread manufacturers.
So, the women indigenously controlled the drug technology because they were the hunters, the gatherers, the wise women who basically says, yeah, nobody can make whiskey until everybody has bread first. And then you also don't give that whiskey to kids or pregnant women. Right? So native folks knew that alcohol hurt the fetus 4,000 years ago.
Yeah, you know, it's in the book of Judges 13:7, it says, "Behold, thou shalt bear a child or a son." I can't remember if it's child or son. So drink no, and what they had a name. So you weren't supposed to drink alcohol. So even if, check it out, Book of Judges, Bible.
Yeah. And remember what the Book of Judges is and what the Abrahamic religions are. They originated in Africa. Okay? So when you're talking about Yeshua, that is the name that his mama gave him, not the Greek name Jesus. So Christianity is an indigenous African spiritual practice religion.
Tell us more.
All right. Where, well, how many slaves did Jesus own? 0.
I was just,
How many wars did Jesus fight in? 0. What is the name of the Bible written in the language that he spoke?
Wow.
The Peshitta,
Okay.
which was written in 450 A.D.
Wow.
The King James Version.
Did he copyright it? Yeah.
Well, he was already an ancestor when that happened. But Aramaic-speaking Christians have never fought a war, never owned slave, never led wars of colonization or genocide.
Wow. Okay, let me swallow that slowly because I think of a lot of our ancestors, like Chief Joseph, like Crazy Horse, like Tecumseh, like, and even other people that I idolize, like Cesar Chavez, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. I think of, as I was growing up, these were some of my heroes because I didn't have, after I moved off the res, I had to have diversity of heroes because my heroes were back on the reservation.
Yes.
And I was wounded because I really wanted to move back, but I was too young. I remember being 13 and telling mom and dad, I'm going to run away. I'm going back to the reservation. And then dad he'd let me challenge. Well, go ahead, take off. So we packed some things and we're running away. And then we got down the way and we realized we didn't have no money and we didn't have the stuff. So we went back home. I was just going to run back. But that yearning. So as Mark finishes with this history, the power hour today is to think where your relatives. I mean, I think about the Cherokee people on the Trail of Tears. I think about Oklahoma, everyone coming from somewhere else and ending up places. I think about a lot of tribes were displaced, not only from the land, we're getting back the land. In fact, we just got this land back place. We we pried this cross that was on this property because it was a church before. Yesterday we pried it off the wall, and it was wood, and we cut it up. And Mona, who lives near here, she wanted to take some to put in her wood stove because it's good wood. So, Mark, please continue because I'm intrigued. I've heard this history, but tell us more about that 4,000 years to now. Like, why must we know African American history? Why is it important?
Well, you talked of the reason, for example, that Black History Month, February, is internally. February framed Lincoln's birthday and Frederick Douglass's birthday.
Wow.
And Frederick Douglass couldn't exactly date his birth because there was no birth certificates for slaves. Okay? So February, there's a week in February that frames Frederick Douglass's birthday and Lincoln's birthday because history is memory for a people, just like you have your individual memory. So internally, Carter Woodson said, okay, Negro History Week is going to be framed between Frederick Douglass and Lincoln, because you need to know the difference between their approaches to freedom.
Wow.
And Lincoln didn't free us. We freed ourselves. He just signed a document and apologized to the slave owners for signing the document. So the natural condition of human beings is freedom. So after the Watts riots, which is opposed to the LA rebellion of the early 90s, riots are spontaneous, rebellions are planned.
Okay.
After the Watts riots, with the emergence of Black Power, we expanded Negro History Week to Black History Month. And it was an internal celebration until Gerald Ford signed it into law because of the popularity. So understanding where community empowerment comes from, it comes from inside a community and expands out. So I'm a Bijago, that's an African nation, and chalked up. Maroon. So a Maroon is a freedom fighter. They go into enemy territory, that is slave plantations, liberate slaves, and head for a place of safety and defend that place of safety against military incursions. So outside of every center of slavery in Turtle Island, there were Maroon cities. So many of the famous ones, like in Brazil, the Colombos, or the Maroons of Jamaica, which is...
that's where I heard was Jamaican.
Yes. So the Jamaican folks made alliances with the Taino, Carib, and Arawak folks, and Jamaica is Arawak for Land of the Springs. They made alliances with native folks, and the term Maroon is a Taino word which means a first-generation African native mix. Because when the Taino made first contact with Cristobal Colon, which is where the title colonization comes from, you also know him by his nom de guerre, Christopher Columbus. The Taino had given Chris 2 gold spear points, and they referred to the material as guanine, which is 14 karat gold, because you need to ally gold, because it's a soft metal, in order to weaponize it. And he goes, yo, where's the gold? And the Taino said, came from these black guys from south across the water. And Chris goes, no, I'm the first. No, you not, Chris. Sorry, to burst your bubble. So he took those guanine spear points to the king of Portugal, and the king of Portugal goes, oh, guanine. Wait, that's what those Indians were saying. Yeah, it actually comes from Ghana. The king of Ghana, a Khan king of Ghana, ties his horse to a gold nugget big enough to tie your horse to. And them Africans like to smell their gold. So sometimes when they put it with copper and things like that, that's 14 karat gold.
Wow.
So that's in Ivan Van Sertima's They Came Before Columbus book. So when I'm saying African people were not just here in slavery, we were here before. So you got to understand that 4,000 years of being a black Indian means that pyramid builders kick it with other pyramid builders.
Woohoo!
Right? So before Europeans had an alphabet to spell integration or colonization, we were here trading with the folks that were indigenous to the continent we called the Circuit of the World. That is the only continent on the planet that goes from the North Pole to the South Pole unbroken. And the only way you know that is if you sail it. Wow. So we didn't come to Turtle Island looking for land. We had Africa. We didn't come looking for gold. We brought the gold. And so part of that memory is understand, no, we weren't looking to enslave Native Americans. We wanted freedom. We brought freedom. In fact, the African model of slavery is you're a captive of war, and while you're a captive of war, we educate you, feed you until you can free yourself. And then you can leave. So there was no permanent class of slavery in Africa. Wow. Contrasting with the model here of chattel slavery, your property, it's illegal for you to read. It's illegal for you to be, you're only 3/5 of a person. That's part of what...
Explain that. What was that 3/5 of a person?
In the Constitution, there are 9 interlocking articles in the Constitution that protect slavery. One of them, the 3/5 clause, was we weren't considered full human beings, but if you're a slave owner, you can count the number of slaves, and that gives you votes for representatives.
So you could collapse.
Well, you take the raw number, say you have 400 slaves. You can't count the 400 slaves as people. It's only 3/5 of a person. So you get that amount of votes for representation, even though they can't vote and they can't read.
Well, you know what's interesting is now only enrolled members in some tribes can vote.
Yes.
So we're like taking a system and hurting our own people?
Yes. That was part of the piece where I was saying inside the box called sovereignty, you use the white definition of what makes you sovereign, which was intentional to destroy native communities. So it's kind of like a Trojan horse.
Tell us more about that.
The black people were at Troy. That's in a piece of writing called the Ethiopis, which was talking about Memnon and the honorable Ethiopians, that was a generic name for Africans, that fought against Achilles and the Greeks. And there was also a contingent of Amazis or Amazons, that is black female warriors, right? One of the 12 kinds of marriage in Africa.
Oh, no, wait.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
12 kinds of marriages?
12 kinds of marriage. 12 kinds of marriage recorded in the 19th.
Not 12 divorces, not 12. Because raise your hand if you have 12. Yay, no. Think about that. There was vows, spiritual, emotional, intellectual, vows of marriage, 12 different kinds. So tell us more about that.
So 12 kinds of marriage recorded in the 1970s, which also means that those 12 kinds of marriage were there before Christianity.
Wow.
Right? So the Fawn of Dahomey, this is Audre Lorde writes in her book, Sister Outsider, 12 Kinds of Marriage. Herskovitz, a white anthropologist, noted that. One of those types of marriage were generically called like Amazigh. They were called the Amazigh tribe. They were bodyguards to as recently as Colonel Gaddafi, who had a bodyguard corps of all women warriors. So the movie starring Viola Davis, The Woman King, basically that's what they were talking about.
I had to watch that 3 times. I loved it. It inspired and uplifted me. I had to watch it 3 times, and every time I got more of my sisters, and we got inspired together. Yeah. So tell us more of these 12.
So, for example, so I can only name something like 8 of them. Right?
Okay. Just name a couple.
Okay. So, all women married to the king or queen. Okay? In that sense. A group extended family marriage, like the artist, late musical artist Fela Kuti, had multiple wives living in a compound. Right? Let's see, Sabon Fusame, the late Sabon Fusame, who's Dagara from Burkina Faso, she said, I actually didn't meet my biological mother till I was 6 because there were multiple mothers, multiple father figures within my life. I didn't actually, the woman who birthed me was still in my life, but nobody introduced her as my mother until, because I had all these other mothers.
Other mothers.
Yes, other mothers. Okay. So extended family.
Extended family.
Aunties, uncles. So part of what was happening in my family growing up I was born in the Haight-Ashbury and raised in South Central LA, is my father would joke, well, we were so poor we couldn't afford a father, so I had 3 mothers. My grandmother and her sisters.
I feel the sense of humor. Right. Well, but just pause for a minute, because think about this. In our culture, all my dad's brothers and sisters were also my parents. My Aunt Carol, my Aunt Melinda, my Aunt Rita, and then my dad's, he was a mini Poca, a favorite child, a baby boy. But because I was his first child, I was favored. So all of my uncles my Uncle Gerald raised me, my Uncle William raised me, my Uncle Vernon raised me, my Uncle Charlie raised me. They all were almost like what you're saying. They were my other parents. So I felt loved because I had a whole bunch of mothers and I had a whole bunch of fathers. And and even in our language, we had kinship terms. My cousins, your first cousins were your brothers and sisters. So just think about that complexity of love. Being loved by so many, you're never alone. So then how do we get isolated? Because tell us some more, but that addiction is slavery, because the only time Indians isolate and don't have all their kinship is when they're in an addiction.
Yes.
Okay.
So, for example, I can actually read and quote white folks who are basically giving the explanation, even though a lot of our audience isn't white. So, Margaret Mead says that the natural family structure is extended. It's tribal. And the only reason that you have a nuclear family that is biological mother and father and kids and 3.2 fish and cats and things like that is when there's been war or some kind of cultural destruction, because then the nuclear family is the most mobile, right? So in our genes, we believe, it should be extended, it should be tribal, but we can be forced to deal with a smaller unit. And for example, then what addiction does, especially if you've had some kind of cultural attack or using a certain weapon to break up a culture, then addiction is one of the means. Religion, weaponized religion, can be another one of the means. So, for example, one of the reasons I say weaponized Christianity is Yeshua never believed in war. And the reason that he never talked against gender expansive folks is because in Africa you had the 12 kinds of marriage. In his time, there were 200 different sects of Judaism to begin with. Right?
Wow.
Pharisees, Sadducees, Presbyterians, John the Baptist, cousin John the Baptist, and goddess worshippers. Right? So 200 different sects. Right?
Okay.
And so if you have a goddess worshipper, then you have a female, expression of creator.
Wow.
And so you have a different structure that does not support rape or genocide and protects children
and doesn't have missing and murdered.
And doesn't have missing and murdered.
Wow.
Right? So all those things are evidence of a particular framework that allows that to happen. Because even though you talked about the cross, the original cross of Christianity was older than Christianity. It was the Ankh.
Yeah. Tell us more.
Well, the Ankh is the union of the sacred feminine and the masculine and heaven and earth. The union of complementary opposites. Not one superior to another. The union of complementary opposites. So Yeshua's Holy Trinity is Mother, Father, and the child of true humanity. Okay? That's the actual Trinity, not Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Like, that's a dysfunctional family. Like, where's Mama? Why is Mama absent? You left her out. Right? The prayer in Aramaic, what's called the Lord's Prayer, first line, Avun Deboash Maya. Birther. You create all that moves in light. So unless biology has changed in the last 2,000 years, how do you get our Father from birther? Well, it got edited out.
Yeah.
In the King James Version.
Yeah. So, but think about that for a moment, because in a lot of tribal languages, we refer to women as life givers, birthers.
Yes.
That they the miracle of that union of sperm and egg, and they're life givers. But they're not only life givers of birthing a child, they're life givers to making the home, making the food, activism. They're life givers to what is best that's going to keep this family whole and well. And the life givers now, I mean, during the pandemic, you saw all the life givers kick into gear. I have a relative who got trained as a teacher, and she saw her grandchildren. She didn't want them to fall behind, because that's a worst thing. And she had a structure and was their teacher the entire pandemic till they could go back to school.
Yes.
The birther,
Yes.
the birther. We think of these ways. We just don't make one loaf of bread. We make a whole bunch of loaves of bread, and we share them. We give them out.
Yes.
So it's a birther. So continue out. Tell us more.
It's not only literally food. It's
Yeah.
also food for thought.
Okay.
And food for being. So just to talk about the Choctaw side. So I have a great-great-grandfather, my grandfather's father, who was a sheriff in Argyle, Louisiana. He's on the Mississippi, I believe it's the Mississippi Choctaw Freedom Rolls, named George Washington. And they're a bunch of George Washingtons. Like, okay, could they either give them their Choctaw names or could they be creative? Why do you have like 20 or 30 George Washingtons?
Wow.
And only you list George Washington and list how many kids they have and the names of the kid.
Wow.
That's the Dawes rolls, right? So that's how I identified, oh, that's great grandpa because, oh, there's grandpa who basically taught me as a kid. He was a Baptist preacher who sold fish in New Orleans, but he said, Jesus is black, his name's not Jesus. You need to find the words, the original Bible in his language. He didn't say Aramaic because I was 8, but I would ask the question, why don't we have a black Jesus in the church in Oakland? And he goes, yeah, in 1965, white people would burn the church down if we had a black Jesus.
Oh, wow.
Right? So we have buried an aunt of mine, and there's a black John the Baptist baptizing somebody in the river in a church on East 14th Street.
Of course. That is now Martin Luther King Street, East 14th Street. Right.
East 14th. Right. So the Choctaw, who were neighbors to the Osage, because the Osage are getting a lot of press these days.
Yes.
The Osage have a 7-gender category, 7 gender expressions. So in Zoom meetings, because you know the pronoun things, like I don't use pronouns. I'm a Mika, which is Osage for a male heterosexual in a 7-gender expression. Because English, we've only been having the conversation, according to the New York Times, about pronouns for 300 years. Indigenous people have been having it for thousands. I think I'm going to go with the elders.
Okay.
Right? So those expressions for us very similar to the African ones in terms of 12 kinds of marriage, whether it's a group marriage, marriage between heterosexuals, a marriage between homosexuals, and also intersex people. Because if you have 2 sets of visible, functioning external genitalia, of which I've met 3 in my career. One was a black woman who had 3 kids and a beard and her breasts and all the other equipment, but lived in Eugene. And again, this is one of those pieces where we've got to aside. Once you can put a number to something, like there's 9 million intersex people in the United States, because that's 3% of the human births every year. So you do the math. Just saying, 9 million. That's like a New York City. Yes. But they're often closeted because it's dangerous to reveal that.
There's only 1 million people in Montana. Until Yellowstone. You know what happened? They watch Yellowstone. They're all trying to move there because they want to live like Kevin Costner. They're just buying up the land, making the land price go. It's so crazy. So let me ask. We've been healing here. We're in our 2nd day of healthy relationship curriculum and adults working with youth. Oregon, can you share with our audience that history when they didn't allow blacks into, please? Because, and this is important, so listen up.
So, I was raised in a family that taught us how to read, just like in slavery, where it was a death sentence to read. So we had to learn to read before we got to school.
Yes.
And so we had a curriculum that didn't include what was taught in school, like ethnic studies, not just black, but native, everybody. I want to learn everybody. I'm xenophilic. I love me some aliens or different people because they're just like folks.
Yes.
So, Ronald Reagan destroyed my drug counseling job in California, so I moved to Oregon because it was cheaper to collect unemployment in Oregon than LA. So I found, and I said, this place is weird. We were living in Eugene, and where's the hood? I've never lived in a place that didn't have ethnic neighborhoods, a Chinatown, a Little Italy, or whatever. Right?
Yes.
So researching, with my wife, who, we basically, she went into the archives and looked this up. Well, black people, free black people, were not allowed in Oregon. It entered the Oregon Constitution that black people could be subject to arrest and deported, even if they were citizens of another state in the United States. And it's not that. So every time there was a black community in Eugene,
Yes.
it got destroyed. And in fact, it was not legal for black people to live inside the city limits of Eugene, Oregon until 1968.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah.
That was law. That was real estate. Banks wouldn't loan you money, et cetera, et cetera. So that was following the Oregon Constitution. And so it's not that black people were banned, because Oregon's like a southern state in the Northwest. It's not that they were banned, it's why. And why was because black people mixed with Indians. That was a quote from Samuel Thurston of the Thurston area of Springfield, who basically said, we've got to ban free black people, not just the 50 slaves, the 200 black people that are in the state, because black people intermarry with Native Americans, and then they create a mixed race that is opposed to white people. No, we're not opposed to white people. We're opposed to slavery, and you want to be a free state anyway. So we want to help you build
free state.
A free state.
Yes.
Because we do our thing. If the archetype of black people, one of the archetypes of black people is we build complex, urban, multiracial societies.
Yes.
Like Egypt.
Yes.
Which was a complex, pyramid building, multiracial society.
Wow.
That's why I'm saying, pyramid builders kick it with other pyramid builders.
Right. But just think for like in 2024, we're having an election in November. In case you didn't notice. But is that same formula to keep us apart and not become united. I know where I live, we just collapsed Pend Oreille County into Glacier County because they've been trying to split and now we will be one of the strongest voting blocks of Indians in Montana. Right. And then I hear, this voting. So then this divide and conquer.
Cheat and lie.
Cheat.
I mean, that's what it is, right? Cheating and lying.
Divide, cheat, and lie.
Yeah.
So then we got to tell the truth. We can't cheat. And so then I'll name just a healing that I noticed with our group here. Okay. It's a healing. If you are one generation or two generations from residential school, which is called in Canada, or one or two generations away from boarding school, there's a phenomena of loyalty. And that it's whoever you were enslaved in those residential schools or boarding schools, you love those other children and you have a loyalty to them. So you grow up and you're teenagers and you're adults. And one of the loyalties is you never tell on them. You never tell what they do because you made a pact when you were children never to tell on each other. So we've been finding, like, if there's like an embezzler in a tribe, no one will tell on them because they still carry that loyalty out of love.